ready? Tell me when you're ready. You good? All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and we are back for episode 7 of the podcast. Today, as you've heard my little intro, I have a guest on, and his name is Aries Loumis. Hello.
Hello. It's great to be here.
Nice to see you again. We haven't seen each other for a little bit since college or so.
Yeah, not for a while. It's been a good bit of time. I think I saw you at Legends.
Legends, yeah. I was back for a gymnastics meet. That was the last time I saw you.
Yeah, exactly.
And we had a little drunk talk about life.
Mm-hmm.
So Aries here, he went to the University of Illinois with me. Mm-hmm. He studied, what was your exact major?
Nuclear plasma and radiological engineering, and in power safety in the environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a very small department.
Very small department, like about 100 students. I can't tell you. I think it was like 150 grad and undergrad in
the entire department. Yeah. I remember during graduation walking, the professor who introduced you guys was like, "We may be the smallest, but we are the most powerful." Had some kind of little quip like that. It was funny. I remember when we had TAM 210 together.
Yeah, statics. Yeah.
Theoretical and applied mechanics with what was his name? Keen.
No, it wasn't Keen. It wasn't. Keen. It was like Tortorelli or something.
Tortorelli, yeah.
It was like
I had Keen.
They like revamped the class.
Yeah, I had Keen for 251. Well, fluid mechanics.
335.
335. Dude, what am I thinking of? Yeah, I forget all the numbers in my class. Yeah, 335 fluid mechanics.
So I had to take mechanical engineering 310.
Okay.
Which was the same thing but a smaller class. Mm-hmm. And for me, I really liked it a lot more personally. I hate big classes.
Yeah.
I was homeschooled growing up. Yeah. So
I did not know that.
Yeah. And I love small class sizes, which is actually great about nuclear for me, because like there's at most like 30 students in each class. And yeah, so I got best of both worlds. I got to go to like big university, but like very, very tight knit like department kind of thing, you know.
And yeah, your major. I studied systems engineering, so I was kind of on the consulting business side, but systems you can do anything. So which is what I'm doing. I just started a new job, so now I went from technical engineering sales to manufacturing engineering. So now I manage 2 engineering lines, and like 30 people are under me, and I manage them. So that's what I'm up to now. The reason I invited you on, and we talked a couple months back when I first started this, I was like, who do I want on? And I was like, I am pro-nuclear. A lot of people are not, but I know someone who is, and that was you. And I kind of, wanted you on to talk about the nuclear energy industry, the science, nuclear sciences, and why we shouldn't be too scared of it. It seems that our notion right now, a lot of the public, which we'll get into, thinks that nuclear energy is green rods that Homer Simpson takes out of somewhere and messes up, and then the plant goes into meltdown and our entire world is poisoned.
Yeah.
Which, is that true?
No.
There we go.
In short.
So there we go. Actually, podcast is done. That's all we had to do. No. So
I wish it were that easy.
Yeah. So, have you on, talk about, kind of what it is. We have a little bit of a script here, but we can go off it and talk about anything.
So, so nuclear is a very, I'd say, misunderstood kind of science. It is a natural science, even though some people seem to think that it's not. So according to a 2016 survey by the National Science Foundation, this is one of those surveys that they do that kind of just like tests public's general knowledge, like does the Earth revolve around the sun? True or false? Or
which unfortunately a lot of people get wrong.
Yeah, a lot of people get wrong. But for this specific question, it was, is all radioactivity man-made? True or false?
False.
False. Okay. Yes, false. But 70% of Americans believe that's true. And we don't really think about, where how radioactivity can seem kind of scary. We don't think about like radon that we're breathing in all the time. Like our fire alarms all have radioisotopes in it. Medicine has radioisotopes in it. And radioactivity is like really everywhere. And that kind of just comes with like, when you don't know about something, there's like this fear associated with it. Of course, like when you think about artificial intelligence or, GMOs, similar thing. Like we don't really know what it is, so it can be scary, which is totally understandable.
It's a natural human reaction.
Like less than 100 years ago, the word nuclear didn't exist, just about.
1938.
Mm-hmm. So there's all this fear that happens into it, and I think that's where it starts. Now, and then there's also like The Simpsons that kind of like brought that negative connotation about what nuclear is, and then there's the accidents. But like I think that a big part of that is like, let's say that there was this alternative energy source that has all this carbon-free energy, and then there are other currently like monetarily invested companies that are investing in some kind of other energy source, like the main one that we have, which is fossil fuels. So there's been this kind of like smear campaign going around like nuclear, because if nuclear becomes more successful, that means we'll be using less oil or fossil fuels in general. And then so making environmentalists and people who actually care about the planet more scared of this than they are about like how many natural gas fires do we have every year? Like
quite a lot,
because
kills way more people than nuclear.
Yeah, because the plant literally explodes. But this is something that we've kind of just become idle to. But if there's a nuclear accident, which there have only been majorly 3 ever in history, and which are TMI, Fukushima, and Chernobyl, then that sort of thing gets a lot of news. Like completely different kind of media. So I think that plays into it. That like environmentalists have this opinion that nuclear is bad, which of course they have. Like I don't feel like the government has been very transparent about nuclear. We don't teach nuclear science in schools. So of course there's all this confusion, and people don't feel like there's like a lot of transparency in it. And then there's the scare of like, nuclear waste, what are we going to do with it? And they're like, oh, we still haven't figured out a way to properly store this waste. And I feel like that's where the US kind of has failed in terms of communication, and they're still kind of failing at it in terms of transparency. So, if you go to Sweden, then
all that as well, like with the U.S. transparency, education, with that, a lot of people I've met, when they see cooling towers, they believe that's pollution coming out of that.
Yeah.
It's just simple things like that. And my argument was always, if let's say the early 1900s, when the light bulb came around, 1908 or something, when somewhere in there where like the first light bulb. If you had told people, hey, we are soon going to have something that is virtually carbon free, pretty much actually once it's created, once you create the plants and the energy that goes into building the plants, it is going to be carbon free.
Yeah, and zero air pollution.
Zero air pollution
is the big thing.
And we can power tens of thousands of homes with something that can fit in the size of your hand. People would just be like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. And so nuclear is witchcraft.
Yeah. I like to think so.
It's magic. It really is. From breaking down fissile materials into usable steam energy, just like and what people also don't realize is that natural gas, coal power, and nuclear energy are actually very similar in the mechanisms that create energy. All of them burn steam or heat up steam. Boil steam. Boil water to create steam. to run turbines, which those turbines then run generators.
Yeah.
All do the same thing. Coal is obviously burning oil and coils to heat up the steam. Same thing, natural gas, which is just going through. Natural gas is going through a turbine, being burnt through a turbine. Yeah. Just like an airplane engine uses fuel to spin the turbine. Natural gas spins that turbine generator. Nuclear, uranium heats up steam, runs the turbines. They actually all do the same thing.
They do the same thing, and
that's all I'll say. They all do the same mechanism of creating energy, just a different type of fuel. One of them is just acute pollution we see right away, burning natural gas, coal, which is terrible for the environment, natural gas less so, and then nuclear is, would you say, virtually almost zero carbon pollution?
Zero, if like it's pretty much on par in terms of its entire life cycle. So you need obviously fossil fuels to remove trucks that go to the facility and things like that.
Which is what I said. Yeah.
So like, but it's on par with wind in terms of its life cycle. So it has the same amount of CO2 per kilowatt hour as wind, or just a little bit more than that. And then there's solar. It's like, I think. Don't quote me on this, but
it's okay. You can quote anything. You are the nuclear scientist here. It's a podcast. You say everything. It's true from here on out.
Okay.
no pressure. No pressure. No,
so I think that this is from the National Renewable Energy Lab, which is a laboratory, I believe, in Colorado, under the Department of Energy. And so the life cycle analysis, I think it was like 11 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour for wind, 36 for solar. And then I think it was like 13 for nuclear. And then oil, I think oil is like, natural gas is like 300 or something. And then coal is like 1,200.
But wait, hold on. We have clean coal. It's clean. It's simple. We've cleaned it.
Well, we do.
We've taken soap. We've taken soap and we've just cleaned the coal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of innovations in terms of, how we reduce it. So like, okay, you said earlier, nuclear and coal are coal and natural gas. They burn oil. They burn things, or they make things hot and then they boil water.
Create thermal energy.
They create thermal energy.
And then the mechanisms are almost very similar.
After that point. But the difference before that is like, when you're burning fossil fuels, what is you're getting energy from? Combustion, right? Mm-hmm. So combustion requires oxygen, which means that you need to take in air into the facility and let air out.
Yeah.
So it's this process that's producing pollution.
Need fuel ignition and a sustainable source of other chemicals, which would be the oxygen.
Oxygen, exactly. And then you need to, if you don't send it out of the facility or a certain percentage of it, then it's not economic. You can't keep running the facility if you're not producing a little pollution. But in terms of like a nuclear power plant, we don't need to, everything is contained. We don't need to send anything out or use any air in order for it. So like that's what the real major difference is. You have a coal plant which is producing CO2 at a large amount, and then you have coal ash which is left behind. So there's these two sources of things that are just like putting shit into the air. Excuse my language.
Hey, this is you can say whatever.
And even like if you live near a coal plant, you are going to get more of a radioactive dose than somebody who lived near or worked in a nuclear power plant. Just because like I said earlier, I don't know if we were recording when I said this, but there are naturally occurring sources of uranium and thorium, which is like in granite and stone and in coal. So when we burn coal, there are radioactive particles that are going out into our air and poisoning us. And so like how much is this contributing to like climate change is kind of the big issue. So like we talk about coal, which is pretty much the worst energy source, and then there's natural gas, which I'd like to kind of go on an energy rant here, if that's all right.
Yeah, we can. And then after that, we'll bring it back to the start of the nuclear age.
Okay,
how about that?
Yeah.
We'll have a little bit of semblance in here.
Yeah.
But it's all right.
So coal. Yeah, coal pretty much the worst. It leaves behind waste, and it also creates a lot of air pollution, right? And then there is natural gas or methane that we can also burn in order to produce energy. And that has a lot less waste that it leaves behind, and it's also a third of the emissions of coal. But the problem with it is that in terms of how it affects climate change, it's almost on par with coal, because you can't guarantee that you won't have leakage of methane in the process. So when you have a pipeline, at least 3% of it is legally allowed to be released into the atmosphere. And then you have methane, which is contributes to climate change more than CO2 does. So that little 3% that's being leaked makes up for pretty much the difference between coal. So methane is 28 times more insulating than CO2 is. So
the greenhouse effect is accelerated by that 3% of gas more than coal. I didn't know.
Well, no, not more than coal. On par.
On par with
it. So like really, if we're burning natural gas, it's not making anything better. On top of it, we're doing hydraulic fracturing, which is causing like seismic instability in our grounds. I think I can't remember. I think it was in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it was where the groundwater poisoned all the aquifers were full of methane. You could light your freaking sink on fire.
Yeah, like residents came with like a milk jug with just like like gassy water.
And also the fracking. That they don't only just put water, they don't only shove water in the ground, they shove like other lubricants, and that lubricants were getting into aquifers.
And then they reuse that. So like they reuse that groundwater every time, and when you're going down, you can also even build up small, because like there are naturally occurring radioactive elements everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. So you're building up every time you reuse that groundwater radioactive elements in the lubricant that they continue to use. So it gets more radioactive. And this is something that is not being regulated currently by our government, because natural gas is something under the EPA, and anything nuclear is usually under the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But the Nuclear Regulatory Commission doesn't have any say in how that is being handled. But it's a dose that, like a nuclear power plant, like if they were releasing that amount of radiation, then it would be like a national crisis. But we don't think about these contaminations from coal and natural gas just because that's how it is. And there are I believe this leakage thing for natural gas was allowed. 3% of it is allowed because of some 1920s Supreme Court case that made that allowable, because they realize that there's no way you can absolutely contain all of the methane. It's always leakage.
It's impossible. And also, for people who don't know what fracking is, it's natural gas reservoirs are between shale in the ground, and in the ground, shale, bedrock, everything that's containing the methane. Mm-hmm. We basically just drill into it, take lubricants and water, and just force it down at extremely, extremely high pressures, and it breaks apart everything. And through that breaking apart, those gases rise and we capture them. We can't capture all of it. And in fact, when we break apart the shale and everything, there's so much gas leaking out that we just have to burn it when it goes in the atmosphere. We can't contain all of it. No. So it's not even efficient at all. Yeah, natural gas is a sham. Everyone's like, natural gas, clean energy. Yeah. We do need it, no doubt. Natural gas runs all of our thermostats in our house, but burning it for energy is very, very inefficient. And like you said, that's something we don't talk about.
We don't. I mean, we even think of natural gas as an alternative right now, and something that can be paired with renewables, because right now, I mean, we talk about, renewables don't run all the time. Wind isn't running all the time. Solar isn't running at night when it's not sunny or windy, and they need some kind of backup. All right, this term called baseload energy, which just kind of makes up for their intermittency. Now, there are a couple ways of getting around this. You can do storage, or energy storage, which we're trying to do with solar right now. Like Elon Musk's company. I think it's Solar City.
Solar City has the solar panels. Tesla themselves have the batteries.
Wall. Yeah, the power wall. And that connects to your solar panel on the roof, and then you usually have too much solar energy coming in at noon.
And you can put it back into the power wall or the grid.
Yeah, or into the grid.
And get paid for it.
And it's all rainbows and everything is perfect.
Of course, yeah. Which, by the way, Elon Musk actually isn't the CEO of Tesla anymore.
He isn't.
He got taken out.
Yeah, he still has something to do with the company, right?
Yeah, no, he's just off of the chair. He's not a chairman anymore, so he's off the board. He still is, I think, the owner. He just lost a lot of his power, which I could get into a whole rant of how much bullshit happened there, and it's just insane that it's weird that a lot of people in our generation want Tesla to fail. It's a strange thing. They think he is an elitist. I got in an argument on Facebook with someone. I actually got called an elitist
for liking,
and part of me is just that nerdy engineering side. But anyway, so Tesla, there are ways that we can get by the intermittencies of green energy.
So now, but like, at what cost?
And where does nuclear come into that?
Where does nuclear come into intermittency? Well, I'll talk about that in a second. But I want to talk about like. So what can you do right now? Like we either pair fossil fuels with renewables, which is generally natural gas.
I keep grabbing your coffee.
Yeah,
Bring that over there.
Generally natural gas is currently what we use mostly to make up for the intermittency, and we haven't really started large scale storage systems yet for energy. We're not at that point, and like the whole reason, and people want to move over to this, but it's not really at a good point right now. And like, where do you get all of this storage from? You know, like mining lithium.
And that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize with all these batteries is that the carbon footprint is pretty low, or actually virtually zero once it's in a car. But to get all that lithium, mine it, the cadmium, anything that goes into these batteries, and then they have to be shipped around the world from the mines in Africa. Then it's way too taxing on our EPA and our environmental regulation system here, so they send it to China instead to have these the lithium put into a froth and acid and everything.
Yeah,
I don't know the exact process. And then from there, you have to use all that carbon, all the shipping, everything to bring it back here to the United States. Yeah. So the argument too with a lot of Tesla and even the Prius, does that car give back its carbon footprint over time from what it took to manufacture? That's a legitimate argument about. So are these green cars really green?
Well, okay. Well, I would argue that can be true, but the thing is that it's just kind of because our entire infrastructure is based on carbon right now. You know, like, and if we don't encourage renewable and alternative energy sources to thrive, then there's no way we're ever going to be changing what we're doing. So right now it might not make any sense. Or like with renewable energy, like I put solar panels on my house. I can get paid by the grid to produce that energy. But like, is that really doing anything for the environment right now? Not 100%, because like you're selling your energy when it's not being used, but the grid doesn't really do anything with it. And that subsidies is just kind of there to encourage the renewable energy industry to like move on, but like, how much is it actually doing? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't get rooftop solar. I totally think that you should. But how much is it really doing for the environment right now? And on the scale that we need it, like, why are we switching over to renewable energy sources? So that we can prevent climate change. But we have this carbon-free energy source that everybody's kind of like afraid of, even though we don't. How many deaths have been associated with nuclear power, like civilian deaths in history? About, I believe, 4,000 total. Now, how many, according to the World Health Organization, how many people die a year from air pollution? How many would you think?
I know it's in the tens of millions.
It's exactly around 7 million. Right
okay, 7 million. I knew it was pretty high.
So 3% of that. Not 3%, like 50% of that comes from people in underdeveloped countries that are burning wood and burning dung and other things so that they can make fires for dinner every day, and which is just they're breathing in these fumes. It's causing them to die. And then the other half is air pollution, like where we are right now.
Well, it's pretty simple. I think we just need to give people in Africa uranium. I don't know why we haven't thought about that.
I mean,
I think it would solve the world.
But like the people who also care for the people in Africa are the ones who are more pro renewable energy more than anything. And they want to send them these solar panels and they want to send them the wind turbines. But like, you have to use all of this land in order to like power those solar panels. And if any of them break, then you have to worry about the contamination from like those heavy metals getting in that area around there. There's also the waste product that comes from the production of solar panels that we have to be worried about, which we haven't found a recycling method for yet, but we're researching currently.
And so with any industry, any manufacturing, there's always waste.
Yeah.
There's always a pro and there's always a con to anything. There's nothing that we can make an engineer to be perfect. We haven't hit that. And that's the same thing with nuclear. When we make a nuclear power plant, there's waste, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
And then you have to build all the cement, all the infrastructure, and all the thousands and tens of thousands of man hours it takes from all around the industries all over the world to bring all those materials together. And that's the case with nuclear. That's the case with building a car. That's the case with building this microphone, this shirt, this computer. Anything that we make creates a carbon footprint. And that's where, I'd rather, it's the same thing with a coal plant or a natural gas plant. You have to build those. It still makes carbon footprint. And then what after? What is the give back period in which, nuclear will give back by saving its carbon footprint or not creating as much versus natural gas and coal. So there are so many there's so many alternative energy sources, and nuclear, which you come in, how to make that more efficient. Yeah. It's there's no simple answer to that. Yeah. I wanted to also get into I think a fun thing would be for people actually here in Chicago, kind of the history of nuclear sciences and technology. And then we'll wind that back into power plants and everything today, and then we'll get to the future of why nuclear and all these alternative sources, where nuclear is going to fit in. So you, if you could give a little history of the nuclear sciences, and
So it all started in France with a very common name that most people must know, Marie Curie, or Marie Curie Skłodowska. She was originally from Poland, and then she married Pierre Curie, and then she took on that name. But I know a lot of Polish people who make sure that I say both because they're very, very proud of where she came from. But yeah, so she was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and she's the first person to win a Nobel Prize in two fields of science, which is physics and chemistry. And because of their discovery, Henry Becquerel and Pierre Curie and their discovery of radium and polonium. And she was also one of the first professors at the Sorbonne, which is like a university in Paris. She was the first female one there. She took over the class after her husband died. And so from there, we discovered that radioactivity was a thing, which is what radium came from, rays, which is Latin for light, I believe. I'm not 100% sure.
I don't remember my Greek and Latin days. Just say it. You can say
Lumos is actually light in Latin, so I don't know what it is. But anyway,
Aries is the light.
So yeah, there's like wavelength, radioactive decay, and then like where did we go from there? We go to the discovery of nuclear fission, which happened between Enrico Fermi, I believe Otto Hahn, and Lise Meitner.
Yes, those were names I looked up last night.
Yeah.
I forgot to write all the names down.
Yeah.
I didn't know if we wanted to get into the names and everything, but it's fun to get into this.
So I really like talking about Lise Meitner's story because she's like, she hasn't gotten really a lot of credit for her research and how she helped. She's the mother of the atomic bomb. Yeah. And so where's Lise Meitner from? So she's from Germany. And when was nuclear fission discovered? I believe it was the 1930s.
1938.
1938,
so
which is
they went
Germany in 1938.
Yeah. And they went to go, basically, they were trying to build bigger isotopes, more heavier isotopes with uranium. And no, was it uranium? Yeah. It was Shit.
Yeah, it was uranium.
It was uranium, and they tried building it more heavy elements, a heavier isotope, but instead they found it's getting lighter. And they're like, why the hell is this happening?
Yeah.
And they didn't realize that they were creating fission, a breakdown of the neutrons. So that's and that's the story of that. And then
Enrico Fermi came to the U.S. In Chicago, specifically at the University of Chicago, and he created the world's first chain reaction that happened right under the steps of, I believe it was called Soldier Field at the time.
And it was they were using for a racquetball court, actually.
Oh, racquetball court.
It was a racquetball court, which is so funny that we think of nuclear energy and everything. They didn't really understand what it was, and they were doing it about 20 feet under people's feet.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it was contained all in these graphite blocks.
Graphite bites, and with cadmium covering it to start the reaction. And do you know the exact time and date it was started?
I don't.
It was December 2nd, 1942 at 3:25 p.m. was the first time that fission was successfully created sustainably. Fission was sustainable with uranium-235.
Yeah, and exactly. When we say sustained, we mean that the reactor is critical, meaning that the same number of neutrons are being produced as there are coming out of the reaction, so that it's happening in this steady state fashion. It's not like going uncontrollable or something like that. And at the time, we did it, and it was contained in these blocks, and it was all fine. Those blocks are also worth so much money now, and I'm trying to get my hands on one of them. Because historically, they've just taken them, and you can put graphite and contain it in more graphite, just non-radioactive stuff. You can do a bunch of stuff. You can even make batteries with it, actually.
Really?
So, the diamond batteries. Have you heard of this? This is like a concept for recycling nuclear waste.
No.
So, so you can take these. It's all radioactive graphite, right, or carbon. So you can take that carbon, you can encase it in more carbon, which is a diamond, and then you can use that as a battery, because it as it decays, that energy needs to go somewhere, so it comes out in an electron, and then that you can use that for pacemakers. You can use that for a bunch of things. I believe that the University of Bristol in the UK is doing that. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. But if you look up radioactive batteries, diamond batteries.
Diamond batteries. There's ways, yeah. And so. And so from there, the University of Chicago, they created the first fission reaction, and that sustainable. What was the term you used?
Critical.
Critical.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of it's called fissionable materials out there. Only a few are fissile. Fissile means that it's sustained, that there's low energy put in, but there's a high probability that there's a breakdown going to occur. And to sustain it, that is the most important piece. And at the time, who was it that the first reaction? No, I forget her name, or the scientist's name here in Chicago.
Enrico Fermi.
Enrico Fermi, yeah. They were like, they didn't really realize, they're like, hey, the nuclear energy, the government was like, okay, good job. And they're like, yeah, this creates a lot of power. And if it's unsustained, this will blow up. And they're like, Excuse me? What did you say? Yeah, this little tiny thing is more powerful than 100,000 bombs. And from there, the government was like, okay. Yeah, no, we're taking over this.
Yeah, and so also that experiment that happened under the bleachers, that was all a secret. That was all very, very hush hush. So that happened. And then immediately after that, the government was like, wow, so we just discovered nuclear fission. We're in the middle of World War II, and we could probably end it very quickly if we did something with this. So what did they do? They were like, all right, I can't remember who it was, but they were like, all right, we need $3 million laundered into our current budget in order to create this city in the middle of nowhere, which is in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, currently the location of Oak Ridge National Lab. And they built the city out of nowhere just to be far away. So this population of this town went from maybe 500 people to about 100,000 in 5 years, to all work on this project on how we can start creating I think it was the X-10 reactor. after Enrico Fermi. And then they went to the production of the atomic bomb in Los Alamos, I believe, which is, and then there comes the Manhattan Project, which is unfortunately the beginning of nuclear industry, nuclear science, all of the production of this bomb, you know. And if you go over to the University of Chicago,
like fortunately and unfortunately.
Yeah, and
for the use that we used it in World War II.
Yeah, exactly. And like what can we need to like get away from this, you know, history that we have with a bomb, you know, like who created the first bomb?
It was Einstein and a few other scientists.
The first bomb, not nuclear bomb.
Oh,
like
the first
bomb. I think that wasn't he Alfred Nobel, the guy who created the Nobel Peace Prize?
What bomb? Chemical?
Yeah, like
normal.
I think it was like napalm or something. Like he invented that.
I mean, the first bomb. The first bomb goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. They figured out that something can be explosive. Maybe not hundreds of years, but I don't exactly know who the first bomb is. I mean, I know in warfare we've been using solid and chemical projectiles.
So dynamite.
Okay.
Dynamite. Alfred Nobel, the creator of the Nobel Peace Prize, felt so bad about what he had created that he tried to do something good, you know, by creating the Nobel Peace Prize. And that's kind of like, you know, like we've found this like huge potential of something to do a lot of good, you know. You know, we can provide electricity to people in underdeveloped countries, you know, without them having to worry about, you know, the air pollution, all of the other things like quality of life, like what comes with the quality of life of having electricity, healthcare, civil rights, you know, a lot of things come with having electricity, you know, that we don't even think about. And
not even healthcare, it's just entire healthy system of energy of attaining resources in a mass quantity that we can sustain a society safely.
Yeah, exactly. And like, but like it all came from nuclear, which in everybody's mind right now is kind of this horrible like fallout kind of like thing. You know?
Which I think the next time we'll talk about why is that. So yeah.
Like, what do you mean? Why is that?
Well, why is it such a horrible thing?
Because people are associating it with this bomb, but you know, like when you look at,
well, I don't know if it's necessarily people associate it with a bomb.
They also think that like nuclear power plants can explode like nuclear weapons,
and I think that's where the fear. I don't think nuclear weapons. You know, some people probably don't even fully associate nuclear weapons with the nuclear, the nuclear power industry and nuclear technologies and the sciences in general. I think our fear of nuclear energy comes from meltdowns more. The word meltdown and the possibility of losing, you know, hundreds of radial miles of land versus a bomb. But I guess explosions are something.
So and like let's talk about that too. You know, after the worst accident that ever happened, there was Chernobyl, and Chernobyl. Where is this? I have this article. So according to the University of Bristol, in the UK. They've kind of find out that like at Chernobyl and Fukushima, how much are these accidents really causing premature deaths? Okay, so if like they argue that homes should not be abandoned after a big nuclear accident, and like what is the reasoning behind this? So I believe that they compared the deaths from the accident to air pollution deaths currently from like living in the city, which is London. So
and the thing, so Chernobyl was a meltdown. Maybe we can get into Chernobyl really quick. You know, I don't know, you know way more than me, but it's just basically they did a test, or they were trying to do a system failure test, kind of like like what would an emergency reaction? How could we deal with a blackout? And basically, there's some safety systems that were intentionally turned off. There was operator error that was combined basically, and a reactor design flaw.
And the design flaw,
Which, do you know much about the design?
Yeah, so
I was reading a little bit about it. I'm just like, I am not a nuclear scientist. I will ask you tomorrow. But basically, there's a bunch of steps that happened, and so design flaw and just operator error ended up with an explosion, a steam explosion that then set off a huge chain reaction. So, you know, was it 28 people died? I'm trying to read it.
It was like 40 something.
So from the initial acute explosion and firefighters. So
yeah.
acute deaths that happened right away was 28, and I believe there's 134 hospitalizations from sickness, and then over time there's been 15 childhood thyroids directly associated. So 134 hospitalizations followed the next 10 years.
Which all could have been prevented.
Yes.
But which through negligence and a loss of transparency by the Russian government ended up with more.
And the same thing happened with Fukushima. Negligence, a bit of negligence, the design.
I would argue that it's mostly a design.
Well, it was negligence because the Japanese government and TEPCO, TEPCO, right? Yeah. The Tokyo Power TEPCO. Yeah, it stands for something. They knew about the design flaw, and they didn't say anything about it. And then also, Japanese culture with very high on respect. They really did not want to admit they messed up because they basically let down their people.
And also, I mean, like the design flaw that we're talking about, also just for reference, is they had levees. They had a power plant that was like right on the coast of the water, and
this is for
Fukushima.
Fukushima, yes.
Yeah, for Fukushima. So they had the levees that were supposed to block out water at a certain height. Okay, and then this earthquake happened. As a result of the earthquake, the power plant shut down. But then the tsunami started coming over. The power plant not shut down completely, but I think went to about 30% of total power output. And then the waves were way over where the levee were. It was, I can't remember the size of the earthquake. I think it was like
7 point something, 7.9, 8.1. It was a
really
very
high. Yeah, very high earthquake.
And the way the earthquake, it was I forget my earthquake and geology stuff. Basically, the way it happened, it moved up in the ocean.
Yeah.
Very high. That's why it was an abnormally big
and
tsunami.
so the waves came over the levee, and then because of that, we powered down for the because of the earthquake. We had to be running on our backup power, which is a generator that can last for about a day or 2 days, I believe, which is literally just a giant train engine. And it's in this room. And so when the water came over, it went down and it flooded this room, which is supposed to be watertight. So now all of them, even in Illinois, there'd be very rare chance of flooding, our backup generator rooms are airtight for water. To prevent water from coming in. And so water comes in, deprives the engine of oxygen, no combustion reaction goes off. The reactor operators are blind as to what's going on. Their indicators aren't really telling them what's going on. And then they had a steam explosion from overheating.
So those reactors, what they do is once the nuclear energy goes into kind of an emergency low power system, there still needs to be water cycling through the system for the cooling. Those generators run pumps that pump cold water through and goes to the cooling system. They shut off, so this water that was in the reactors just sat there.
Yeah, essentially, And that's a similar situation to what happened at Chernobyl. Yep. Okay. And also let me just go back a second. So let me ask you this question: how many people died at Fukushima as a result of direct exposure to radiation?
Wasn't it like 2 workers, 3, or so? It was right.
No. So acutely, 0.
Oh, I thought. Okay.
And then afterwards, there is one guy who at this point is like he's dying of cancer, and the power plant is paying for all of his healthcare. There's a lot of speculation on whether or not it was as a result of the power plant, like an actual spread of radionuclides, But yeah, that's really all we got right now. Now, 10,000 people died at Fukushima as a result of a tsunami and an earthquake. And then also the fear of evacuating the area because of the nuclear power plant. But there was only potentially 1 death as a result of it actually happening. And this is, you can look on the World Health Organization. Their current website will say there are 0 deaths as a result, because this is like, there's a whole court case and there's a lot of speculation that went into it for this one worker. But yeah, that's all you got. Now at Chernobyl, what happened is like Europe kind of just discovered the next day that there was this release Russia didn't really tell anybody. People were, I think that somebody who was working at a nuclear power plant, they like walked in their grass in the morning and then came into the power plant, and he was a janitor. And his foot was so radioactive from stepping on his grass that morning because of the plume that had come down that he didn't even go beyond the gates of where the nuclear power plant workers were, but he was next to it, and the detectors started going off, and that's how we kind of discovered that there was something going on at Chernobyl.
Wow.
Now, okay, so now how bad was the accident? It was a horrible accident, of course, but like, should those people have been forced to move their homes? So according to the University of Bristol UK, for comparison, the average Londoner loses 4.5 months of their life due to air pollution, while the average resident, this is a different one. Now, where is, however, the researchers found the 900 people with the greatest radiation risk amongst the 220,000 strong second evacuation of Chernobyl would have lost just 3 months life expectancy by staying in their homes, and none should have really been asked to leave because of this different. Now air pollution, just living in the city, we're getting a much larger dose much larger loss in life expectancy from just breathing in this every day. And we don't really think that like should people have to leave their homes as a result of a nuclear accident for that? Now, I'm hoping that we won't have another nucler accident at all.
That's why you're here,
and
that's why we need more people.
Do what I do.
Exactly, yeah.
And now, but like at the cost, how many people are going to die as a result of climate change? And we want to move over. Yeah, air pollution. Just
not even comparable.
Yeah. So I have I'm like a really big climate advocate. I spent this summer at a climate policy camp with the Citizens Climate Lobby. Got to meet one of my all-time favorite heroes, James Hansen, who is he's a NASA, currently a Columbia professor, worked for NASA and spoke at Congress 30 years ago, asking them to do something about climate change. And he's been doing it for 30 years since then, continuing to talk. I mean, he got burnt out for a couple of years, but then he came back. And he's currently on my profile picture.
If you go back to people also realize that James Hansen.
Yeah.
What's up, dude?
Oh wait, no.
What people don't realize too is pilots and people who fly multiple times a year get more radioactive exposure than people that work at nuclear power plants.
Oh yeah, because it's cosmic radiation.
And once you're high up in the atmosphere, it's thinning. Nitrogen, oxygen doesn't block and deflect as many of those radioactive isotopes that are coming through the atmosphere. So when you're in your airplane, you get more radioactive exposure than you'd be working at a power plant. I read something. It was an article from researchers. Something about a few hours in a plane is equivalent to 6 months or something. 4 months at a plant.
It's a lot because
if you fly for a total of 48 hours or something, which a year, which lots and lots of people do, you've basically worked at a power plant for 6 months. It's something it's something.
Which isn't to say that it's bad, but because you don't really get a huge dose from working at a nuclear power plant.
But that's the misconception that you're next to a nuclear power plant. It's really no. I mean,
everything is contained.
Eating 1,000 bananas in a year will be near almost equivalent too.
And so that's kind of based off of something called the linear no threshold, which right now the Trump administration is kind of pushing for the abolishment of, which is L&T model. I'll say for right now. And Stephen Colbert just talked about this yesterday. He was yesterday or a couple of days ago, and he was like, the EPA is trying to get rid of the linear no threshold model, which basically says that a little radioactivity is okay. So, which is to a certain extent true, but it's more complicated than that. So, there are 4 types of radiation. There's neutron, there's beta, which is electrons, and then there's gamma, which is high energy photons, and then there's alpha particles, which are literally just high energy helium atoms being shot out. So now with alpha particles, you could block it with a piece of paper. Like they can't make them through because they're giant helium atoms. Like to get through anything is pretty much impossible. So something I was planning on bringing today was I have a necklace made of uranium. And
dude, don't be bringing that on the podcast, man. I don't want to get sick here.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, dude.
So I wear it.
Yeah.
I wear it just to kind of like talk about how, you know, it's not all bad for you.
Yeah.
And I got it from these wonderful ladies called the Mothers for Nuclear in California, which is Heather Zates. Heather Madison and Kristen Zates. I'm sorry. And there were some really nice ladies. Now, like this can't pierce your skin because it's mostly alpha particles. You know. I also have a little tiny vial of tritium at home too, which is all beta, and beta is bad for you for close proximity. So like if I, you know, like what is from a nuclear accident, what are we worried about exactly? Do you think that it's going to explode? Like, I'm just going to say that that's wrong. We're worried about the spread of mostly iodine-121, which is something like our thyroids. What do? We take in iodine. We can, and like that's what we're mostly worried about. If you take iodine pills, or if a nuclear accident has happened, you have pills. Like if you live in the area, they will give you pills to take. And as long as you have that amount of iodine, then you can't really ingest it from the air. And so that's what we're worried about. And the thyroid cancer. Now, thyroid cancer also, like if that's our biggest threat to a nuclear accident, then it's really not something that should be stopping us from continuing to use nuclear energy. Like thyroid cancer is one of the most treatable types of cancer that there is. And I'm not just saying that because I like nuclear science. Like I've also volunteered for 13 years with the American Cancer Society. And these are, you know, like we're talking about leukemia. These are very different things. But thyroid cancer is pretty much what the result of a nuclear accident is going to be. Unless you're like one of the firemen who were like taking out the fire incorrectly because it wasn't, they did not have protocol correct.
And this is for Chernobyl.
Chernobyl specifically, yeah. But like, what are we worried about from a reactor? You know, there's this TV show on the CW called The 100. And they're kind of, have you heard of it?
I have.
Yeah, so they're worried. My friend was watching this the other day, and they're like, they're trying to leave the planet because the nuclear power plants are about to explode and hit their like lifetime or something, and then it's going to be also radioactive. So people are like walking around, and they start like coughing up blood and stuff, and like that's not what's happening. That's not what can happen as a result of this. It's coming from like thyroid cancer, and unless you're like in the reactor room, you know, like then you're gonna start coughing up blood and stuff because there's so much radiation being bombarded at you. But like when you're a mile away from
what causes that when you start coughing up blood? Do your organs start shutting down and
So I can't remember the name of it. But it's like acute radiation sickness.
Yeah.
So you're the I think they're called villi in your stomach, which you know they're kind of
Wouldn't it be a villi in your lungs? You mean?
I think
A villi is what? Yeah.
That's in lungs, but
there's villi. Oh yeah, there's
others in stomach. There's like something that are like villi, and so those things basically just get destroyed, which means you can't absorb nutrients, and then you start puking.
Acute radiation sickness. Yeah, ARS.
Acute radiation sickness. So you can start puking because the lining of your stomach is not allowed to take in any more nutrients. So this can happen in a wide range of effects. So like for the people who die immediately, they're experiencing this, and then like if it happened over time, you experience like a permanent, like I don't know if it's permanent. I think that your body can still heal from it if you have a smaller dose. But like the people that you see that are coughing up blood, like that's generally what this is coming from because it's destroying you, among other things. Now, if you're like right in the middle of like a reactor core, one, you're going to be bombarded with neutrons, which is going to cause mutations. So this would,
which is what cancer.
Yeah, which is what is going to ultimately lead to cancer. Now, if you're outside of a reactor, the biggest thing that you have to, if you're like a mile away from the reactor and it's exploded or something, what you have to worry about is thyroid. That's really it. That's the biggest concern that we're going to have. Now, I feel like I'm getting super off topic now.
No, that's all right. I mean, I was gonna bring up, so those are the acute issues with nuclear power, possible meltdown, and creating this for a specific radial area.
Yeah.
I think the biggest right now in nuclear energy, really, there's not a worry of meltdowns. I mean, we've gotten to a point where you can talk on we plant design, safety design, we have that. The biggest contention we have in our society about nuclear is the waste that comes from it. If you have anything else to say about nuclear sickness, basically it's not gonna, that throwing up blood stuff, only if you're at the plant, at the site, ground zero, that's where it's really gonna happen. But the biggest contention right now is nuclear waste. So I wanted you to kind of explain what exactly is nuclear waste, why is there waste, and then what we're doing with it now, and what we can do with it in the future if we figure out better methods of looking at it or containing it or recycling it, I should say. So those are like the biggest issues like that I see is that we just don't know what to do with it other than put it in kitty litter, which is actually a really funny fact. I was doing research last night and I didn't realize that all those yellow barrels and all the nuclear waste we see and those barrels, you're like, what's in those barrels? And I started looking up more into it. It's literally just the rods surrounded by lead, graphite, and helium, and then
backed, and then concrete around it.
And then they put kitty litter around it too. Just a lot of cat litter. So I guess I would ask, what exactly is nuclear waste? Okay. Or what is the byproduct once there's too much of a breakdown through fission and there's not enough energy to boil steam at a rate that's we use it.
So there are about, like, currently in nuclear reactors, we only utilize about 10% of the total potential energy that's in it. And that's because of a lot of non-proliferation safeguards. So, like, right now, we only use 3% enrichment of uranium in your reactors, whereas, like, a weapon is 90% enrichment of an isotope called uranium-235. The rest is 238, which is fissionable but not fissile. Now,
what is used in atomic bombs? Is that 235, 238?
235, okay. Mostly. I mean, some 238 is there, but yeah, it's mostly that. And so, like, there's that difference in volatility. And so the more volatile, the higher your enrichment, the less waste you'll have, and the more energy that you're going to get out of the reaction. Right now, we use very low enrichment in order to make it. I think it was John Oliver who said this. He's like, it's like trying to get to stop making weapons or to stop proliferation. Proliferation means like spreading something, and then non-proliferation is like stopping the spread of nuclear weapons specifically. And we use a low enrichment to make it pretty much impossible for someone to steal the fuel and then make a weapon out of it.
Which, side note, with John Oliver, I love John Oliver. His show is amazing. That episode on nuclear energy, I knew some of the facts that they kind of reported misrepresented. Yeah. And what made me sit there, I was like, I trust the research that John Oliver's staff does. But when I was watching the show, even I sat there, I was like, that's not right. No, and I knew personally just from school and what I've learned nuclear energy and what I've talked to you about. This was like 2 years ago, year and a half when they had that episode. And I was like, that's not right. And then it made me realize, like, I get it that John Oliver's show is for comedy, entertainment. They have to mix that in.
But I don't think they did a horrible job either.
But that does make you realize too. It's like, what else did they have misrepresented or skewed it for? They definitely, obviously a much more liberal show. Skewed it for a certain demographic, and also comedy. They have to make it funny. It's an entertainment in the end.
And so something that he said that I really like, and I like to say a lot, is, trying to make a nuclear weapon out of the fuel or nuclear waste in general is like trying to get drunk off of one can of PBR. It's just not happening. Yeah. There's just not enough in there. So like, what is the waste? And like it can be utilized for other things, and it's also really small. So the amount of like waste that we have in the U.S. right now is we could fit on a football field, about 3 stories tall. Don't quote me on that, but it's about there. It's there. Easily contained and in a small area, and currently being held in these dry cask containers, which are giant concrete containers. Here's a little GIF I made. No, go back. A slow-mo of... Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, listeners and headphone users.
So here's a slow-mo of ballistic missile testing on the dry cask containers.
And I could put this on after editing. I can
send you this link then.
That'd be awesome. And also, I've seen the tests in Europe where they take an entire train locomotive engine and just go at like 60 miles an hour and smash these truck trailers. And they don't even move at all.
Yeah, they don't.
The structural rigidity of these casks and security containers are like out of this world.
Yeah, they're exactly. Insane. And so this is how we set up the containers. We make it like, so not only are they very difficult to get in, you'd have all this infrastructure if you were like, let's say, a terrorist who wanted to use like it for dastardly reasons. There's almost, it's very difficult to get into these containers, and then like once you get in them, there's almost no gain that you get out of them because there's so little like material actually in there. And what are you going to do with it? It's like low grade fuel. It's already been depleted pretty much. The only thing that it could be useful for at that point would be into an advanced reactor, which are these like Gen 4 breeder reactors that can run on nuclear waste, which we don't currently have any right now because there's a lot of technical things that go into actually recycling them. But we also have reprocessing, which Paris is doing right now. France is doing right now. So they actually recycle and use almost all of the energy in their fuel. And then they have this byproduct, which is like 1,000th of the size of our U.S. waste. And that's all. It doesn't produce any neutrons. It can't be used for nuclear weapons. And this is at... I know that Sellafield in the UK is where they're storing like this specific type of waste, but it's very small. And also, like, in my opinion, these things can be reused for other purposes. And it's not like...
Or, and when you say France, they're repurposing it. Are they using it for reprocessing to be used again in power plants? Or are you saying in a lower energy output, like, plant?
So basically they, like... There's uranium left over in the fuel that we have in the U.S. And so basically they send it through this process to get that extra uranium out that we didn't burn in our reactor, and then they put it back. And then the waste that comes out as a result of that is radioactive. I can't remember the exact isotopic composition, but it's like, it's not producing any neutrons. So it can't be used for a weapon. And right now we're working on kind of like glassifying them.
Yeah, I've heard
vitrification is the word, but glassifying is really what it is.
Just putting in a big drop of glass.
Yeah, and at that point it's contained, and it can't, when we think of nuclear waste, we think of like green slime and like it's spilling everywhere, and Lisa Simpson, and her little sister getting into it. Maggie, yeah. It's Maggie Simpson eating it or like using it as a pacifier. There's some episode where Homer accidentally takes home the nuclear waste or something. Yeah. And that's kind of our perspective, but it is solid and it's well contained, and so like that's what waste is. It's solid fuel pellets, and like it can be reused. There's so little of it at this point, and right now, my opinion on this is like we have such a short time between 2050 to reduce our emissions by 1/3 of what they are right now. Why aren't we using nuclear? Why are nuclear power plants closing throughout the U.S., which isn't the case here in Illinois because of our policies, But why is this happening? You know, like in Illinois, we have more nuclear power plants than any other state. We have about 11 reactors, 6 operating plants, and we passed I believe it's called the Future Energy Jobs Act here in Illinois, which basically is kind of like a reverse carbon tax, is the way I like to put it. It's like we didn't tax carbon, but we have subsidized renewable energy, and we have subsidized 2 nuclear power plants, which are Clinton and Quad Cities, so that they can continue running. And basically it makes it so that natural gas and coal are uneconomic in our economy. And so we're mostly using the other ones. And it's just that policy is like really making us, go ahead.
No, go.
Yeah, really making us kind of like go the extra mile in terms of our energy policy towards like becoming more carbon free. And that's what I think the rest of the US should be doing. Like, I'm very pro renewable, and I think that we need to be pouring a lot of money into this, and then stop the closure of nuclear power plants. We have like about 99 operating nuclear power plants in the US. I think one closed last month. And like, what comes with a closure? You know, let's say like in California right now, Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant supplies 9% of all of their energy. And if you shut that down, what's it going to be replaced by? It's going to be replaced mostly by natural gas. And we're building our renewable portfolio, but we're still using all these fossil fuels. So how does it make any sense?
And an interesting fact, in 1991, we had a quarter of all nuclear reactors in the world, our country. And you'd think, wow, that's a lot. It was only the peak of our energy from nuclear was 22% of our country's energy came from nuclear. It's less now. So that just makes you realize how much energy we use in coal and natural gas.
Yeah.
One thing, I want to touch on really quick. So it's about $5 to $10 billion today to start a plant, approximately.
Yeah, it's really unclear because of regulatory issues, but yeah, continue.
And a lot of those plants need to be subsidized to get started. How do we make that not profitable, but economically viable for us to keep going with nuclear? That's one of the biggest issues because around natural gas, one of the issues why nuclear is so unclear and why profitability and economical viability isn't there is around natural gas and coal. You create so many jobs and so many industries. Nuclear,
and very fast,
very quick. From your truck driver that has to deliver coal to the mining to the running to operating. Nuclear isn't as much.
Yeah,
that's one of the.
Not as much. Not as much. Higher paid though.
Higher paid. Yes, but again, that money is coming from subsidized from the government. Which is our tax dollars. So to someone who sitting here, my tax dollars are going to the government, which is subsidizing all of these nuclear power plants, which cost more to run. The argument with coal is, well, it creates thousands and thousands of jobs, not only on the plant and right around, but just through, going all throughout the government and the world to create these materials for these plants. Same with natural gas.
So economically, why not use that one? Why not use the coal plant? And why not use the natural gas plant?
So that's the argument, which then we could break down into fucking Trump's bringing back coal when it's like you do realize mines are automated now.
Yeah,
you're not creating thousands of jobs like you did maybe 30, 50 years ago. That's not the plan.
It's job loss prevention is kind of what he's going for right now.
Yes, which is
not creating more, but stopping coal plants, which are closing around the country, which is, in my opinion, a good thing.
and which is what happens with any industry economically. You just restructure and move industry around. Once one technology closes, others open. That's just a fact of how any economy, any economy in any business or business venture, once one closes, new technologies come out, arise, and new jobs are created. But the argument is there isn't as much of an economy around nuclear. I wanted to dive into.
So I'd love to talk about how that's changing. So right now, the biggest cost of constructing a nuclear power plant, it's like you have your set construction costs for materials. Okay, like that doesn't change. And then like, so where's the problem that's coming into this? It's all regulatory. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission comes in, like let's talk about Vogtle nuclear power plant, which is currently it's a next generation reactor called the AP1000, which is much our most advanced reactor that's happening in the U.S. And now here in
where's that being built?
I
forget.
Yeah.
And that's owned by I looked
Westinghouse?
up Westinghouse, which was a division of Toshiba.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, probably not many people know that Toshiba, your computers and everything, and Westinghouse, your shitty TVs you buy from Best Buy.
Yeah.
Also
create nuclear power plants.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Japanese companies and Korean companies always they diversify into insane stuff. Yeah. Like Mitsubishi, a fun fact, Mitsubishi cars that we see on the street, that's 7% of Mitsubishi. The rest is banking, military, construction, satellites, semiconductors, boats, you name it. They're insane. But anyway, Vogtle's closing down,
So Vogtle is like, so what's the main cost that's coming from a nuclear power plant? It's regulation. So you come in, a regulator's like, oh, I don't like this. We need to redo this to make sure it's safe in this way. And now when you're constructing a plant, this can cause a lot of construction delays.
Georgia
Power.
Burke County, Georgia.
So like, how are we trying to change this in terms of regulation? Is basically through reform. Right now, there's something called the Nuclear Utilization of Keynote Energy Act that just passed our House, or the Nuke Act. And now that it's passed the House, it's likely to go on, and become a successful bill. Basically, this is just trying to hold a regulator accountable for it, because kind of how the history has been is like, if you're a regulator and you say something isn't going to work, like you'd never get fired, for saying something isn't safe, but you could get fired for saying something is safe when it wasn't. So we have this very, very paranoid regulator that's driving up costs of regulation. And now this act is kind of like working to hold accountability to the regulator for doing that, sort of thing. Now we want a well-regulated industry because we don't want another nuclear accident. A nuclear accident somewhere, like in one place, is a nuclear accident all over the world. Let's just be honest about media coverage and everything. And
it affects the entire industry.
Yeah, it affects the entire industry. And we want a good regulator, but we want a regulator that it can be reasonable, and can be efficient and fast about these things. So we're trying to create like this reform in that sector, and that's kind of going to help drive down costs of it, which is like, that's the biggest cost. Now in Georgia, Vogtle has been created. The first AP1000 is like under construction. Now, who is also building an AP1000 and is currently operating? China. So they have already started running their nuclear power plant because they haven't had to, their regulator is like much less intense than ours. So they're
China in general is a little,
yeah,
they're very laxed on the rules of the regulation.
Yeah, but China also is in a really dire crisis. I mean, like everybody's seen the videos of air pollution in China.
Oh, it's like horrifying.
Yeah, like people are creating bricks with the vacuum. Like you can just suck in air and then start like accumulating all this carbon just from the air. And then there's this industry of cans of fresh air coming in and being shipped from Canada, and people are just like inhaling them.
Could you imagine if aliens came down and they're like, they saw advancements in all types of fields, but they're like, oh shit, you guys figured out nuclear. Good job. What are you guys using it for? Not a lot. I mean, we just basically scan people's brains with it and only make about 10% of our world's power. What do you use for the other power? Oh, we burn a lot of shit so that our planet's gonna be heating up.
Exactly.
It's like, what?
And it's
you
like,
have it. You've almost got it, humans.
Yeah, I know. And like that's kind of where China's at. They're like, we don't care. We don't care about like the public opinion on nuclear. Like we really need it right now. So that's why they're building, I believe, 40 nuclear reactors from like 5 years ago until like 2030. That's like how many they're trying to build. And it's because they need more carbon-free energy. And it's not even a climate change thing. Like whenever, so I believe in climate change. And my biggest thing is like, when I'm talking to people who don't believe in it, like, you can not believe in climate change all you want, but like, what about air pollution in general? 7 million people die as a result of air pollution every year. And even if you don't believe, and that's not including the effects of climate change, that's just like what we're using right now. And then like, personally, when I talk to people about that, they have a different opinion, like, because those are deaths that we're currently seeing instead of this apparently make-believe simulation that's telling us that somewhere along the line the earth is going to get hotter and blah blah blah.
I mean, that could be an hour-long topic about the denial of climate change, and how our president believes that it's a conspiracy created by China to stave our industry.
Exactly.
With the funny thing with climate change, I've always looked at it as Pascal's wager. So Pascal,
like pressure?
No. Pascal's wager he's a philosopher. Forget when, but basically it's saying with religion, whether you believe or not in religion. So people back then would fight the church in Europe, and the thought is if you're an atheist or whatever, Pascal's wager is why not live your life by the 10 Commandments and the Bible, even though you might not believe in God and you're an atheist. What do you have to lose by at least living by these axioms that have been created for our society by the Bible? So it's like, whether you believe in hell or not, at least live your life as if you believe in hell. Because in the end of life, if you die and there is hell or heaven, you'll go to heaven. Pascal's wager for me, looking at that to climate change, why not live your life as if the planet is dying? What do you have to lose? That's how I use Pascal's wager. And if you get really into climate change, it seems like there is one side that is on the conservative right that happens to be a lot more religious. But that's why, with climate change, I just argue, why not live your life as if it's not? People say, obviously, it's going to stave off new industry and coal and jobs. That's the main argument. That's really the main thing.
I've heard better arguments, but the thing is that if you I believe in people need access to energy, and by making it more difficult for people to get access to energy, you're essentially letting people die, because let's say from a more anti-climate change perspective, fossil fuels are good. They give people a better quality of life. They give them access to electricity, and by thinking that fossil fuels are wrong, we're essentially preventing people access to things that they need, like healthcare, better quality of life. And so if you don't want to send third world countries oil and stuff, which they're going to do on their own right now because it's the cheapest option, then you're kind of anti-humanist, and that's how environmentalists can kind of come off as we need to reduce populations at the cost of of these things. People don't need access to energy because it's going to destroy the earth if that happens, but it's that's not cool. Everybody needs energy. And so that's how there's the environmentalist perspective that's save the earth for the earth, and then there's more of a kind of up and coming conservative mindset that's save the earth for the people so that the people can live on it. And that's kind of the perspective that I try to take. I'm personally very liberal, but my opinion is that humans need to be taken care of. And right now we have this option of
which is why I brought up why I make the analogy with Pascal's wager was because the right tend to be very religious, and that's who is again usually arguing against saying that climate change doesn't exist. So that's why it's that's an argument that I go with when it's okay, let's look at religion wise, let's look at it that. What do you have to lose? That's why I brought up Pascal's wager.
Well, but the Bible also says all of this is for you, the earth and all of its resources. So do with it what you want, and that's kind of against what we think of as environmentalists. I mean, I think that you can be both of those things.
Yeah.
That this is for humans, but you also have to take care of your shit.
Yeah, no, and if you believe God created this earth for us, don't fuck it up.
Yeah.
It's very simple. Yeah. It's a very simple, so that's why I use Pascal's wager. Why not, if you what do you have to lose by believing in religious doctrines? What do you have to lose by being an environmentalist? But so going, along with the future of climate change and nuclear engineering and technology in general, the next steps, we use fission right now for all of our nuclear needs.
Yeah.
The next step is
fusion.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's where we're going.
So fusion, I've made this argument that if we can harness fusion properly and hit that split of right now we are at 50-50, right? We put in as much energy as we get out with bombarding hydrogen together to create helium.
Yeah.
If we can make that jump to creating a fusion reactor,
like net positive,
net positive, that will not only be the most important technological advancements that we've ever made, but probably going forward.
Yeah.
It would be, without a doubt, the single most important advancement for humankind.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
There's not even argument. We'll be able to have the sun in our hands.
Clean, abundant energy, and the only waste product is helium, which is chemically inert and cannot harm anything. So it's literally the holy grail of energy, and it comes with this idea that like when you take uranium, and that's fission, and that's like you take something big and you break it in half, and that creates energy. But for some reason, our universe also works in this other way, in which you can take something smaller and put them together, and then it also creates energy, which is taking two hydrogen atoms, bringing them together, and they're more stable as a helium atom than they are as hydrogen. So this process creates energy, which is what fusion is, and which is what stars run on, which is, and we talked about critical earlier, that the equivalent for fusion is ignition, which is what stars are doing. So they're producing all of this. But anyway, so now, like, I think that when I talk about fusion, I don't like that we think that like, oh, we're at this point where we haven't hit the break-even point, and it's like that's not the case. We're not in this like net positive stage. We're in this net positive stage not because it doesn't create a lot of energy, but because it's kind of too explosive right now. So like when we're making this, we could make a like a tokamak. This was a fusion power like device. It's like this donut shaped chamber. They kind of uses electromagnetic confinement in order to push particles together and then make them fuse. And then this process is totally net positive right now, but so net positive that it kind of destroys the machine that's making it happen in the first place.
That would be an issue.
So yeah, and that's kind of where we're at. We have this materials issue where we're creating this heat, and it's being bombarded on its container, and it's destroying the container while it's happening because you're trying to harness the sun, literally. And we're at a point where we can create more energy in it. We can run tokamaks and things, but right now we're at the point where we only run it for like 10 seconds maximum. I don't even know if we're actually there at 10 seconds. And so we have this materials issue, this like physics issue, and like how do we like find a way of getting rid of this energy fast enough so that it doesn't destroy the container that it's in? And that's kind of where we are now. And like what we've heard about in fusion is that like, oh, it's only 30 years away, which is where it's been
for 30 years. For the last 30 years.
Yeah, for the last 30 years, every decade it's 30 years away. And it's like, are we going to be able to do it? Now, I'm optimistic, and I think that we need to keep doing research on this, obviously. And if it happened, like, we would have an unlimited supply of energy, and we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. It would go from like, it would become this like thing where everybody has access to. And right now there are just like a lot of issues that come with energy right now. And so fusion, there's something called ITER, which is, I wish I remember. I think the acronym might be in another language. ITER reactor.
ITER, yeah. I did a little research on fusion last night and the ways to attain it and the possibilities of technological futures with it, which the most important would be space exploration.
Yeah.
Fusion you need, especially if you want to be traveling to other stars and have generations. Fission may not be anyway, you can.
Yeah, so fission, like if we're traveling to other stars, what's our main,
Well, first, space exploration is very important, but also here on Earth, that would be even more important.
Yeah.
To use fusion.
I actually need to use the bathroom.
You need to use the bathroom?
Yeah.
You can't do that. It's impossible here.
Okay.
Yeah. Go through the door there.
I'm like trying to go before.
No, go for it. Go for it. No, I'll take over the podcast. So with fusion, I was doing research last night. There are a lot of different ways that fusion for the future can be used. Go this door here. Yeah.
Okay.
Go through there and then through the closet.
Thank you.
Yep. So there's many different ways fusion can be used. And there was a really I wish I saved it, but basically one of the ways is that you shoot lasers at like a graphene material, these kind of sandwiched materials of graphene, and you hit it off it, protons break off, and the helium comes together to create hydrogen, and hydrogen goes to helium. They found that there's weird vacuums in these solid materials of helium, and it can actually like change the molecular structure of these materials and then heal them right back up. So I found that there's this weird helium transport system that they came across, that in the future possibly you could have solid objects like an iron wall, and if you had these lasers and reactions and at a small scale, you could send material through solids and like basically heal them right back up. So who knows in the future with medicine just going right through our skin, not through absorption through skin, it would just actually physically change the molecular structure and go through without even our skin even knowing that it really happened, or transporting materials through solids. There's like really cool stuff with fusion. That is one really weird byproduct that is just theoretical that could though possibly work. But with space exploration, right now, we use nuclear fission reactors for Voyager, satellites, anything long distance. We have that. But if we can do fusion, you're back. What's up? Fusion, you'd be able to power it almost indefinitely.
Yeah, almost indefinitely. Now, like, where are we right now in terms of using?
What's up?
Are you guys still going?
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good.
So in terms of like plutonium, which is like currently powering the Mars Curiosity rover.
I just while you're in the bathroom, I went on a weird rant of like theoretical uses for fusion and how they like make voids in metals and stuff that they use to power the lasers. And they're like, in the future, I was reading this. I'll show you the article. You may have heard of it, but like you could potentially make nuclear transport systems through solids that like would basically make voids and holes through metal. But what's weird is the molecular structure of these metals come back together.
Weird.
Yeah, they like that's the potential. So they're like, for medicine transmission, it wouldn't be putting a medication on and having our biological absorption through our skin. But what if you could send materials and medicines acutely with lasers right to where you need it? But the lasers would just take that medicine and transport it through without your body even knowing that it really happened. That's
an interesting concept.
It was a weird byproduct of a fusion reactor that they realized there was these voids in the metal that helium was escaping, and they're like, how is the helium escaping like through these like metals, but the metal hasn't changed molecularly? And they figured out it was a weird void. And I was just
so I mean, like all atoms have void. They're mostly void.
Yes. Yes.
So there's like, we have this like,
but it was more of imagine like crystalline structures not being disturbed.
So yeah, crystalline structures don't have to be. I mean, like we have something we call cross sections, which is basically like the probability that something will do something. So like
the probability that something will do something.
Something will do something.
Yeah.
And like when
very
we call
specific.
a fission cross section, it's like how likely something is to fission. And so like not everything has a certain cross section. So when you bombard something with radiation, some of it's going to go through the void, and some of it's going to hit your atoms, essentially. And so I haven't heard of this research that you're talking about.
It was a theoretical thing that they've done it on such a small scale, but they're like, what if one day, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, we can do this where we would just be able to send materials with essentially
like teleporting medicine.
Almost, basically. And it was like a possibility in the realm of things. But anyway, so we were talking about fusion, and I kind of jumped into how, we use fission on satellites. So Voyager and the Cassini are all RTG reactors, which is thermoelectric reactors. Which actually, when I was at ISU for a bit, I actually did research with RTG, and it was really interesting. The material is called bismuth tellurite, and that creates the thermal
coupling.
Yeah, thermal coupling and electrons. So there's one side of the material is hot, cold. There's what's the word I'm looking for?
There's a voltage created from that changes temperature.
Called
the thermoelectric effect.
Thermoelectric effect. Yeah, and we actually use that right now in a lot of things. We have camping materials, so like if you have a fire and you're cooking stuff, why not have stuff around it to charge your phones and stuff? We use it on small scales. Right now it's only like 15% efficient or 20%. It's really inefficient.
Really?
Yeah, it's not that efficient.
Wait, where is this? What? You're using like a radioisotope in a camping material?
No,
okay.
Same instead of radioactive, thermoelectric effect.
Okay.
Which eventually will. This is a little off topic. I'm not going to get into it, but those thermoelectric effects are used in satellites.
Yeah.
With uranium.
Uranium, plutonium.
Mostly, yeah, it would be plutonium 239 or something like.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
I looked it up. I actually have it written right here.
Okay.
Plutonium 239. Yeah. I wanted to check with you, but that's how we power satellites. But fusion. Get back to that.
Oh yeah. Okay. So fusion, kind of a holy grail of energy sources. Now, we're working. I know some people at Oak Ridge National Lab who are doing some testing on materials, specifically like how can we create a material inside of this reactor that will be able to withstand the radiation bombardment from the sun, essentially. So there are a lot of advancements in it. Now I could say I don't know how far along we are. Now we use electromagnetic confinement like plasmas, which is in this little plasma light.
I'll maybe get a video or something to play. Yeah. This is really cool. I want to see what it feels like, but I also don't.
It'll burn your I have I have a little bit of my skin there that's kind of been burned by it because I was I have to find out how this hurts.
How painful is it?
You feel like the burn. There's a little tiny burning sensation, and then the current that goes through you. I wouldn't say it hurts, but it's
gives you a nice little zing. Does it feel like the pens? Have you ever been tricked with a trick pen?
Yeah.
Does it feel like that?
Oh wait. No, I haven't. Never. Nobody's ever done that to me. I've seen it in cartoons and stuff.
I was a weirdo. Yeah. I was a weirdo, and I used to get those, and I had them in school. I would trick you. I got a detention once I was in 4th grade because I brought one to school. And I did, but it just zings. You feel it through your wrist and your arm. I kind of want to do it. To anyone that doesn't know what this is, it's just plasma.
And I'll
get a video.
This purple.
I'll get a video and play it for him.
Look that you're getting is what's in the air, nitrogen. And so when you cause a current through nitrogen, it starts to let off photons that are in this purple spectrum. Now there's also other things in the air that are causing different colors like CO2. But CO2, usually when you run a current through it, I'm pretty sure everything that comes out is infrared. So you would be able to see it. But that's where the purple color comes
I want to put my finger in that on air, but I'm also I don't need to. I'm one of those people who my sister has shock collars for dogs.
Oh, yeah.
And they're really powerful. And I'm one of those idiots who's what does this feel like? And I put it on my neck and I just started zinging myself and I turned it all the way up to 11 and just okay, that hurts. Sorry, little dogs that feel that. But
so fusion, I wish I could talk more about it. Although plasma and fusion sciences are in my major, I don't know a heck of a lot about it.
You know more than the average human.
I can say that.
Way more.
Yeah, if fusion is successful, it's really going to do a lot for the world. It would be, right now, we're current limitations on radioisotope batteries for, space exploration is about 40 years. I think that we could probably go up, but it's still, if we want to fly to the nearest solar system with habitable life, that's about
Alpha Centauri, which is 4 light years.
4 or 40?
4.
4?
4 light years. Yep.
And that's the one with the 7 planets?
Correct.
Okay.
It's only 4 light years away.
Yeah, so only 4 light years away. Now, that would take 4 years at the speed of light. So going our current speeds, I think that it would take us...
It's like 1,000-something years.
It would take at least 3 generations of people to make it through that trip. So they'd have to like go on the trip, have babies, tell their kids like, hey, we're in space and now this is your job.
That's not... The current fastest object we've created, which was Voyager, is 11 miles per second.
11 miles per second.
Which is fucking fast.
Like what is that in terms of like the speed of light though?
Not near.
Yeah, not near enough. So,
at all. So right now our proposed issues are solar propulsion, where we would
using solar rays
and lasers to use those photons to be able to push very far, or ion drives.
Which are actually very similar to fusion reactors, in this donut shape where they like use electromagnetic confinement to shoot out particles.
And I know NASA and JPL recently in the last couple years had a decently powerful ion drive, which theoretically in the next 30 years or more could be sufficient enough that once we get into space, we could propel very, very quickly. So yes, again, it would be like, I think they said if theoretically we had that drive, it would be like 100 years or 80 years to get to Alpha Centauri.
Yeah, and then like then comes the issue of how can you go into... Well, there are a couple issues on top of this, but like
there's a lot of issues.
There's a lot of issues with this. So like one of the issues, the biggest one, is long-term space exploration. And like, what do we get when we go into a plane? We get cosmic radiation. And the same thing's going to happen if you're going into space. Now, like, so I know...
Dude, there's a lot of stuff too with generations. Like they've studies on mice in space and conception for future generations. A lot of stuff, biological organs get very confused when we're not in gravity. Yeah. We've been built, and our evolution is based off of 9.81 meters per second squared pushing down or pulling on us. Yeah. In space, that confuses our body a lot. Exactly. So... I mean, there's a lot of issues with that. Food. I mean, we have to grow food on the spaceships.
Yeah. So so there's issues with long-term space exploration. Like there's radiation exposure, which is a big concern. So like even going to Mars right now, can we do it without getting enough dose that's going to kill the people who are on board? You'd have to be able to get to Mars in under 3 months, I think, is the time for you to not have like something potentially lethal to hurt you. And so like if we're going to go do these long-term space explorations that are going to be like 100 years, how are we going to do that without worrying about this exposure rate that we're getting? And so there's one issue. Then there's also the issue that let's say we even get to that point, how are we going to get people there in 100 years? Like you send people and then they have to have kids that are going to outlive them, and then you have to be like, hey kids, like you were born into this weird thing.
Yeah, you really didn't... the ethical dilemma of, you didn't have a choice. You have this spaceship with not many commodities, but on Earth, dude, it was fucking dope.
It was great.
It was great on Earth. Not up here, though, but you're doing a huge service for society. That definitely is a dilemma, but there's so many, dude. I've looked... I might want to do an episode where... I maybe get a someone from NASA or someone who's working in the aerospace industry, or maybe I'll just do my own research on my own and just do a solo talk into the mic and the camera. But there's so much fun. Then time dilation. Do you know what that is?
Yes, time dilation is so awesome.
It's awesome. So what people don't know is like when an object is moving relative to something else, for example, we're on Earth, satellites are rotating around the Earth. There is time dilation. Those satellites are actually technically going through time relative to us. So the longest telecommunication satellites from the 90s out there have gone through time for about 1/100,000th of a second or something like that, or 1/10,000th of a second through time. So technically it's gone through time. We've stayed here, meaning that thing is actually 1/10,000th of a second younger than us. And
well, it depends on which way it's going.
It depends which way. Also, how far the gravitational effect of Earth actually affects time too. Yes. So less gravity means they will go through time slower than us here on Earth. Yeah. So there is a weird thing. But if you do send a generation out to space, let's say at a quarter of the speed of light. I don't know exactly. Basically, let's say it takes 100 years to get to Alpha Centauri. They explore it. Theoretically, they can get back in another 100 years, let's just say. On Earth, 1,000 years may have passed, or 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Whereas them, they've gone through 200 years.
Which is like Interstellar.
Which is that movie is based off of
like general time dilation.
Of general relativity.
Yeah. So we have our planet, which is spinning really fast. So there's that one speed from the rotational.
I think 1,028 miles an hour or something.
Yeah, something like that. And then we're also like bombarding through the universe going a certain speed. So this combination of times, makes us experience time as we know it. And then if you go to another planet that's not rotating as fast, or then you're decreasing the speed.
Keep in mind though, it has to be very fast. If a planet's
for it to actually cause a difference.
If a planet's doing half the speed of Earth, that's negligible amount of time. But if you have a very high, if your sun had a lot of gravity, or the planet had we would have other issues with gravity and planet. Yeah. We're only made for this. If a planet's twice this size, we'd get crushed.
Yeah.
Which is a cool theory too, with like the Fermi or paradox. So the paradox with why we haven't seen life. If a planet's even like
Fermi,
yeah.
Which is funny because he is a nuclear engineer.
Yeah.
And I thought it talks about philosophy, also about like why haven't we found life in other places.
I thought it was a Fermi, but also if a planet is 1.2 times bigger than this, so 20% bigger than our planet,
gravity is very different,
and gravity is very different, and it'd be or even if the diameter or the radius is 20% bigger. There's like 50 or something % more mass because of how much bigger.
Oh yeah, because that volume change.
The volume change. So it's like 50
to the third.
Yeah, so it's like a 50 or 30% bigger mass. So like you wouldn't be able to leave with our current rockets. So we are at a very lucky size with our Earth that we can use chemical propulsion to get us off. Because if we were 10% bigger, it'd be almost nearly impossible. Okay, and then that would assuming that our atmosphere is thick enough to create propulsional thrust from rockets. So maybe if the atmosphere was more dense though, which if the planet is bigger, there is more gravity. This is really interesting. I'm getting off topic, but the atmosphere would be that much heavier, which means denser, which means more propulsional or thrust from rockets. So this is not going off nuclear. I think we're just having a little fun now. But anyway.
So wait, how long have we been recording?
We've actually been. How long do you think? This is interesting. The time.
I'm gonna say 50 minutes.
Time travels really weirdly. There's time dilation going on right now. So with this podcast, it flies way more than you think.
Yeah.
We have hit an hour and 43 minutes.
Okay.
So we can end it off the next 5 minutes if you'd like.
I mean, there's like one other thing I want to talk about.
Go for
science in general.
Yeah, you're on the podium here. You're my guest.
So like we've been talking about mostly about energy the whole time. Obviously, energy is a very important thing to me, and I care a lot about it because I obviously care a lot about climate change. But something that I love about nuclear science and what makes me an avid member of the American Nuclear Society is like all of the other uses that you can do. So there's like medical isotopes. There's agricultural benefits of using nuclear methods. There's you can like stop illegal logging using like little radioactive tracer elements to like see where something is from, or like
I never thought about that.
So isotopic.
So it's like an isotomic RFID chip.
Basically, yeah. So like this is another thing. This is like a method that we use for checking wine. Like, how do you know if wine is a certain age? Okay.
I do not know.
Through nuclear science.
I don't know. Shit. Okay.
So you basically do an isotopic composition of this wine, and right now. These are signatures. Remember, I'm gonna like point out these are signatures. They're not like something that you should worry about in terms of like if you're drinking this wine it could hurt you, but so like there are certain radioactive elements that are only man-made, right? And so in 2011 during Fukushima there was a spill. There was like a slight whatchamacallit, not contamination, dispersion
of radioactive
particles
into the ocean.
Now some of that at this point, like very tiny, I'm telling you, like signature trace amounts of that has gone to California where wine is being made. So when they're looking at they look at the concentration of a certain element that which means like if this element is there, then if this element is not there, then we know that it is before 2011.
Wow.
So these are like little
interesting
markers that we can use to see what age of wine is.
I would have never thought that.
Yeah, and then that's how we can make sure. That's the only thing, because it's the passage of time.
Because it's that specific radioactive isotope, and we can look at the half-life and look back to where it came from.
Yeah, and if it's present in any amount, then we know that how old it is, essentially.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So there's another thing I wanted to bring up, like Star Trek. I don't know if anybody's a big fan of Star Trek, but so what is her name? Her name is Lieutenant Uhura. I believe Lieutenant Uhura, who's played by Zoe Saldana in Star Trek, right? So necklace. Yeah. So Spock has lost Lieutenant Uhura, okay, and he has also given her this necklace that is made of a certain radioisotope, and somebody's like, whoa, you're gonna like giving her that dose, but it's actually the cross section is so low that it wouldn't interact with her body at all, but it's radioactive. And so he uses this necklace to find out where she is, like kind of like around her, because it's giving off this specific signature, like radioactive signature, and then he uses that to teleport her onto the pods by him. And this is like a necklace he gave her out of love. And so like you can use these, essentially that same technique to decipher where something's coming from. So we're using it right now to stop illegal logging by putting tiny tracer elements in wood or in the trees. So this tree should not be cut down, essentially, so that when it comes through like a wood chipper or somebody's trying to sell it, they know that this was logged illegally. Now we do the same thing in like for airports to stop poaching. You know, like you can put, there's a startup that's doing this right now. They're putting radioactive tracer elements inside of rhino horns, so that if somebody tries to, smuggle it across an airport, then detectors are going to go off, and then that can stop like poaching happening. And then there's also something called mutagenesis, which is a method used in agriculture in order to create diversity. So like, how do you what is plant breeding? We have, like, if you looked at banana, like Google bananas, what they look like originally, disgusting.
Yeah.
So like, and what we do through that is we breed so that they become more sugary and more fat and something that's edible for us, right? And now, but like, how do you get breeding? You like do a year, you pick out the best one that you like, and then you do another one. So you're just kind of like creating, you're using the mutations in each one, and you're picking out the one that you like more in order to make it better for the next generation. So mutagenesis is something that the International Atomic Energy Agency is working on in Indonesia. So Indonesia has a huge consumption of something called tempeh, which is like one of their major dishes, and that's all soy, but they can't produce soy locally. It's like just their climate doesn't really work for them. So what they're doing right now is they're creating new varieties of soy that can survive there through a process called mutagenesis. So you're creating mutations, and then from these mutations you're looking at which one is the best one, and it's kind of like a fast track through like natural selection, essentially. Mm-hmm. So you're creating more diversity in your plants, and whichever ones that aren't doing well, you take out of the equation. Now, this isn't like a perfect process. It needs to be regulated well, and I'm not saying like all plant breeders should start like bombarding their shit to get more varieties. No, but like this is like one way that we can create it, and a way that is actually already being used right now. And so like there's GMOs, which are highly regulated right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say that is just what you're talking about is a GMO, which a lot of people don't know GMOs. Mm-hmm. Which so we can get into an hour-long topic on why I'm pro GMO.
Yeah. I'm pro GMO.
I'm completely pro GMO.
But it's like, so right now there's a place called Bikini Atoll, which is this, which was an island that we just nuked the shit out of with weapons, essentially. And so after that, the U.S. government or the military was deciding like, hey, we need to create new varieties in like plants. So they decided that they were going to take rats, vegetables, corn, and other things to this very radioactive island to create new lines. And so one of those lines that came out of the project was so they exposed these seeds, or I believe it was seeds, to radiation, and then they grew those lines that they had. And so one of them ended up being super sweet, of corn in particular. So, and they were like, wow, we've never seen this before. So we got this. So then from there was created sweet corn. Yeah, from the radiation that came from a nuclear weapon. So like,
thank God we created that bomb. If we didn't have sweet corn, man, I wouldn't be eating corn.
Yeah, and so like, and you think like there's this term like natural, unnatural. You know, like are these things, all of the food that you're eating looked nothing like it did 100 years ago.
A lot of people do not know that.
Yeah, they don't think that. And this is through breeding, you know, like selective breeding. And now these nuclear methods for creating diversity, these are already being used around the world. And they don't experience the same kind of regulation that GMOs do, because it's like more selective through GMOs. And, you know, if you want to create lines with radioisotope, with like mutagenesis, that's a lot easier for you as a plant breeder than through going through GMOs, because GMO has this negative connotation associated with it that people are terrified of.
Yeah, I get so annoyed.
And it's just like science in general. There's this like you know, gap of knowledge that's created that causes fear, and in that same way, like through nuclear technology, through GMOs, vaccines, you know, these things that we really need, you know, people are afraid of. And
it's just lack of education.
It is a lack of education.
And fear mongering, playing into our fears of change and the unknown. And that's the biggest issue right now with our world and social media and, you know, our factions of society that have toxic tribalism, that pin ourselves against each other, against the knowledgeable, unknowledgeable, education, poor, rich, and that all plays into our fears. And I mean, maybe in the future when you're back in Chicago, we could do a whole other episode about GMOs.
Would love to.
We can do more research on that. Because today or last night I was doing lots of research on nuclear, which I loved. I was on Wikipedia, then from there going into research articles. I was like, this is so much fun. I wish I was in school still. I was like, what am I doing with my life? But you know, we've gone for an hour and 53 minutes. Yeah, I'm telling you, time dilation.
We need to relax. Yeah.
Time dilation happens in this here and now. But I would love to, you know, have you back on. We could talk about GMOs, maybe more in any of the nuclear industry and research that you have done or do.
Yeah, my boyfriend's a crop scientist, so I hear about this all the time.
That's awesome.
He makes purple corn.
Bring him on here, dude.
Yeah, if he wants. I'll talk to him about it.
There's so much to talk about with technology around nuclear and how it affects so much of our world. And that's why I wanted you on, because I've always been a proponent and argue for nuclear is, you know,
the benefit of humanity.
Yeah, and people, you know, it's changed our past, which has changed our present, which will always go into changing our future. We need more investment into nuclear and all the sciences.
Yeah,
we need that. There's not even no question.
And we need more interest.
Yes,
in people in general, because like I don't think it was 2016, there were only like 400 total graduates with a degree in nuclear engineering in the U.S., which is sad.
Yeah.
You know, we have hundreds of people going into AI and all this new stuff,
which is also just as almost important. But what do you need to power that?
Yeah, exactly.
But then if the robots got a hold of fusion and could power themselves forever, they don't need to use us for cells and batteries like in the Matrix. So maybe we shouldn't do that, dude.
Yeah, maybe that's a good point.
We don't want the robots having nuclear energy. And that's actually why one of the reasons I did this podcast, because I love exploring and talking and teaching people about the science and STEM fields, technologies, and how it's going to be shaping our future, and how society, from your average consumer to your technologically literate, can change the world by using it and creating it. So that's why I want to do this podcast. So I do Cars Live and everything in between, and this is kind of an in between, having you on, educational, and I just want to thank you so much for coming on.
No, dude, thanks for having me on.
Time flew. This is by far one of my favorite, if not, this is my favorite podcast I've done. This is my bread and butter. I love talking about that. Yeah. So do you have any of the last things you want to plug? You have anything you want to plug? Go for it.
I'll plug an organization that I volunteer with, Generation Atomic, the American Nuclear Society, Environmental Progress in California, Mothers for Nuclear, and personally, I like to, identify myself as an atomic humanist. Like anything that I'm doing it for the betterment of mankind, and I feel like people might think that I might be like this shill for like the nuclear industry or something. And
you're a shill, bro.
And I'm very pro-nuclear. I can't like deny that,
and I am too.
But like I'm not getting any benefit from doing this. I just like want to talk. And then last thing, so I brought this on the show. This is a little beer bottle opener that I have. It says beers not bombs on it, and it is made from disarmed nuclear weapon systems. So they took the the computers and like the shit, like the housings of the missiles and stuff, and they recycled them down to make this beer bottle opener, and it says beers not bombs.
Awesome.
That's from War to Peace. And I don't know. I love talking about nuclear science. I like to remind people that it is this it is a natural thing that's occurring all around us, and it's not man-made, even though that's kind of the majority of thinking on it.
And that's technology in general. I always say that we have why I went into engineering is we have so many natural resources, and as an engineer, we can manipulate them to our advantage. Yes. So and same with nuclear.
Yeah. And like we talk about like there's always a cost to everything, and like sometimes through science there doesn't have to be, like vaccines, they're just good. Most of the time they're just good. And so we could talk all day, but hey, thanks for having me on, man.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone out there enjoyed the podcast. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.